The way we power the world is changing, and you can help lead that change. With Chevron Renewable Energy Group's EnduraFuels, a complete line of high-quality bio-based diesel solutions for fleet, marine, and rail that enables reduced carbon intensity and improved engine performance, all while helping you work towards profitability targets. Join us as we lead the way toward a lower carbon future now.
There is over $1 trillion of waste in supply chains today.
The net zero carbon emission is something that corporates are taking very seriously.
To meet these objectives, they're going to have to take into consideration.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Net Zero Carbon, the show here at FreightWaves where we focus on decarbonization through a lens of freight, fuels, and energy. Today, I've got the pleasure of being joined once again by Serge Schamschula, head of ecosystem at Transporeon, and welcoming a first-timer to the show, Marcelo Marcal, logistics purchasing director for Electrolux Group, focusing in Europe. Hi, guys. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for receiving us, Tyler. It's a great pleasure. I was waiting for that.
Thanks for the invitation, Madam. My pleasure.
I think this is going to be a really good episode. We've had Transporeon on in the past. We've looked at some different products and offerings, and you guys have done a wonderful job evangelizing sustainability across the entire supply chain for freight and logistics. This is the first time, though, we get to bring on a customer and hear from a customer-facing story exactly what the focuses are and how we're delivering on these very ambitious goals in many cases. So why don't we start there? Why don't we let Marcelo give a little bit of a background on your role, Electrolux, and where you guys are focusing specifically on decarbonization and freight and logistics.
Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, I'd like to start with the Electrolux Group because we'd like to call ourselves a global appliance company that has been shaped living for the better for the last 100 years. Yes. So our area is to reinvent taste, care, and well-being experiences to make the life of our consumers better. And that we have some strategic drivers which are sustainable, create better experiences, and our group. We have a purpose called this shape leading for the better. The reason is, this is the reason why we come to work every day. In everything that we do, every product we design, every idea and human interaction, we try to shape living for the better. So this is our main purpose of Electrolux. And when it comes to sustainable strategy, we have what we call the For the Better 2030 program, which basically we are trying to act sustainable in everything we do, bringing that to the design of our products, the services we are providing to our customers and consumers, and how we drive our supply chain as well. So this is the highlights of the introduction of anything.
Excellent. I think that's a really noble, ambitious goal, and I love that it's not just customer obsession like you see in many firms' mission groups, but it's kind of human experience obsession that you guys get to move towards. That's wonderful. Serge, why don't you remind everybody a little bit about your role and about Transporeon?
Yeah. Head of ecosystems. The ecosystems converts in a kind of wider definition of partnership, including academia, research, and stakeholders in the industry, independent whether they are users of our transport logistics platform. In Transporeon, we have the mission. We had already the mission in 2020 to bring logistics in sync with the world. But in 2020, we took one more step. And we talked to the stakeholders in the industry and the industry leaders to which extent we can strongly foster sustainable solutions for logistics. Marcelo Marcal with Electrolux was one of those. And in 2021, in autumn 21, that led to turn from bringing logistics in sync with the world into bringing logistics in sync with a sustainable world. And in the meantime, we have not only taken the time of our customers to tell them how they could foster their way to decarbonize logistics, but we have also taken action on our end, becoming a science-based reduction target member and decarbonizing our own operations as well.
You got to walk the walk if you're going to bring customers along for the journey. I love that. That's actually a really good segue too, because that's something that's becoming more and more common as customers are now, or as companies are now being pushed to operationalize or deliver on some ambitious goals that we've set in the past. So why don't we talk about some of those targets briefly? Marcelo, if you could say, what some of those 2030 targets are in relation to logistics. And then Serge, maybe for you as well, is that a net zero SBTI target? What level of ambition are you guys discussing? Let's start with Marcelo.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that we define the target. So back in 2016, we set the ambition to reduce 80% of our emissions in Scope 1 and Scope 2 by 2025, and 25% of reductions in Scope 3. So basically, we are now in 2022, and the results of 2022 so far tells us that we have already achieved our targets 3 years ahead of time. Meaning for Scope 1 and Scope 2, we have reduced more than 82% of our emissions, mainly in operations and into the utilization of our products, and more than 25% in terms of the distribution of our goods. So these are, our ambitions that have already been achieved so far, but we are not stopping there. We are going to be carbon neutral by 2030 in operations.
That's close to as ambitious as it gets when we talk carbon neutrality. Serge, care to comment on Transporeon?
I had to look up the numbers, to be fair. Yes, we try to adhere to the 1.5 degree temperature increase limitation that converts into reducing our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions from greenhouse gas emissions by 42% by 2030, based on 2019, and our Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions should be reduced by 25% by 2030 as two intermediate goals to achieve carbon net zero, to be precise, by 2045 latest. And that was an exercise actually which was helping us a lot to understand also the situation our customers are in and what are the difficulties. If I remember when we tried, I mean, everyone can easily get its Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, installing sensors or looking at sensors other people have installed. Once you get to your Scope 3 emissions, you're going to get blind from one moment to the other. That was really exciting to see. And the other thing is, in the first instance, we thought it's only us, an IT supply chain company, which has 84% of Scope 3 emissions, such a huge amount of. In the meantime, I learned that the average of the industry is 80, including the chemical industry. So quite a lot of interesting learnings at our end.
Yeah, if you start digging down the carbon accounting rabbit hole, you'll learn pretty quickly that Scope 3 is the beast that everybody is trying to understand. I liken it to, if you've been to the eye doctor, which all three of us are wearing glasses, I'm sure you have, when you're getting your prescription checked and they change the lenses on you and you can see the letters, directionally, it's fuzzy. We know it's big, but the closer we get, the better we can see. So more data is always better in defining what that Scope 3 looks like, and clearly more guidance. Thank you both for setting the stage on that. Why don't we talk next about some of the strategies and actions you're taking to achieve those ambitious targets? I mean, Marcelo, we're talking in the next 7 years, probably six figures every year of annual CO2e emissions coming out of just the logistics piece. So when you start slicing that up into achievable bits, what does that look like for your group? What are some of the strategies you're pursuing?
Yeah, Tyler, just to give a perspective of how much Electrolux is emitting in terms of the distribution of our goods, we need 2/3 more in distribution of our goods compared to the production of the goods. So there is a big impact of the transportation in all of the areas, land, air, ocean. And just to give an idea, we're talking about 450,000 metric tons as the starting point for us. And our target by 2025 is to reduce that to nearly 299,000 metric tons. So nearly 160,000 metric tons is what we're talking about reducing. And as I said before, we already achieved that target 3 years ahead, but we're not stopping there. And what we're trying to do is to apply strategies for transitioning from the most polluting transport modes to less polluting, meaning we're trying to shift hard from traditional diesel road transportation to intermodality, to rail. And when we stay in the road part, we are also promoting this transition for more friendly equipment. We've been utilizing electric trucks since 2019 at the Electrolux, and now we are heavily investing in the supply base so they can make this transition to more sustainable vehicles like the biodiesel, the HVO, the bio-LNG trucks. And we are succeeding at that, not only in Europe, but on a global basis.
Those are all important initiatives. Serge, do you care to comment on a few of those strategies? I know we'll plug our friends over at GLEC, just coming off Smart Freight Week recently. All of those things that Marcelo is mentioning are clearly high on the importance of shippers. How would you care to comment on how we're doing at achieving some of those?
Indeed. So maybe I can answer from two different angles. The one is how we frame these undertakings, and maybe a bit of impression from last week's Smart Freight Week, and how the industry reacts. So on one hand, we have to decarbonize. We have on one hand these long-term solutions, and I do count alternative vehicles and fuels and energy sources, including the infrastructure and the financing, into the long-term solutions. For example, in Europe, trucks which will be still able to come into operations. So ICE, internal combustion engine based trucks, in 2035, they will operate for another 17 years on average. So this is not something short term. Also, serial production of electric vehicles starts in 2027. So last year, for example, only 5,000 electric HGVs have been registered. I know it appears that there were much more than those, but this more like every social media post equals one electric truck. So this is a long-term thing, an important thing. It's part of the solution. It's just not the only solution, so to speak. And enabling a stronger rail and intermodal network or a strategic network optimization are other long-term solutions. And then we have these short-term abatement solutions, as the World Economic Forum is calling them. And the importance of those is that until these long-term solutions come into effect, all the emissions going into our atmosphere will stay there. So what is the difference if we act now or if we wait? The difference is 1/3 of the entire balance sheet of our greenhouse gas emissions, 1/3, which is not going to disappear from one moment to the other, even if we reach net zero at 2050, for example. And therefore, these short-term abatement solutions are needed, and actually we need to take action here as we speak. So most of these, not all, are related to digitalization or based on digitalization. And it starts with tactical and operational level, like route and load optimization, empty mile reduction, demurrage reduction. Eco driving is free of any digital solution as we speak, for example, but also collaborative sourcing, execution of modal shift, and procurement and emission combinations. So this is more or less what I see, how I frame that. Going back into the Smart Freight Week, I found two, I would say, directions as a result of that. The one more from the shipper side. Many shippers are very much focused on the conversion from this internal combustion engine to alternative energy-driven trucks in particular. As said, that's nice, but it's not a golden ticket. It's not going to solve all the problems on itself, apart from nitty-gritty details which shouldn't be ignored. But it's only part of the solution, and that solution comes into effect very late stage only. And the other thing which I heard from large logistics service providers, that was a bit disappointing. There was a lady, and I'm not going to quote the company name, of course, but the large leading logistics service provider on that globe said, more or less, like, we don't have any idea who is doing our transports, which we do subcontract, what happens there, how we can decarbonize. We have pretty much no chance to do so. So let's buy carbon credits to the extent possible. That's all we can do, which I don't think is the way forward, in all fairness. So having tried to give you two answers on one question.
That's a great one. We could take that a million different directions. I'll comment on just a couple things. One, we won't even go down the rabbit hole of carbon credits, but that's a whole conversation. I see some value in interim offsetting, but I also see lots of risks, obviously. So it's interesting to hear that that's part of the conversation. And I will say, you mentioned a few things that are super important. One, collaboration. I think that's part of the reason for this call, right? Discussing how Transporeon and Electrolux are working together to achieve some of these targets. But it doesn't just require a long-term, let's wait and see what happens. If I'm trying to lose weight, I can't plan on losing that last 20 pounds on the last day of the diet plan. I've got to change my behavior on the front end and work with my constituents, my trainer, my family, the grocer. There's lots of people that are going to have a responsibility for helping me in that, even though the effort is my own. So let's talk a little bit kind of with that framing, Marcelo, like what's changing within your purchasing, or what would you like to see changing from your suppliers to help you guys move faster on your decarbonization plan? And I'll tee up one more question as a subset to that. We have to be able to track those changes, right? In that analogy, I've got to have a scale so I can track my results. What are some of the ways we're engaging with our suppliers to be able to track progress?
That's actually a great passion, Tyler. When it comes to purchasing strategies, as we have this long-term target, so we are also thinking long-term when we are selecting our suppliers. So basically, we're not selecting a supplier to stay with us for a couple of years. Instead, if we are asking these suppliers to invest in new technologies, less impacting in terms of emissions, they also need to have the security that they would invest and they will stay with us for long years. And that is about what's happening. So one thing is to select suppliers that have the profile to invest in this new technology. And the other thing is to work with them to select which is the best option for the decarbonization. We're talking about your diet, So our feed, in order to cut our fat, the biggest cut we are doing through intermodality and rail, that's for sure. But then the other part that remains, which is the road transportation, we are now working not only with the truck manufacturers, but also with our transport carriers. Say, guys, these are the vehicles that are out there. We are really to support you in the investment plan if you go for these technologies. And by the way, stay with us for X many years of collaboration. So to me, this is key. And every day, and this is part of my passion and my work day, every day I'm calling suppliers, I'm calling the OEMs. We are promoting events to explain how can we do this transition. And we have been very successful at that. And that's why we got also invitation to participate in many different discussions around the topic. And to be honest, it's also very pleasant to see that we have progressed so far. But also, it tells me that so much more can be done just by working in collaboration.
Start working toward your lower carbon goals today with Chevron Renewable Energy Group's Endura Fuels, a complete line of quality renewable fuel solutions available now. To learn more, visit regi.com.
Yeah, you almost find hidden wins that you didn't know were there because you're deepening ties and understanding each other's businesses a little bit better. And you mentioned education as a key piece of that too. I find a lot of times, especially with mid to smaller tier suppliers in the freight and logistics, sometimes it's even a resource constraint where, yes, I may know that there's additional reporting or additional data that I need, but I need someone to help me figure out how to get that efficiently and to be able to communicate that to every stakeholder upstream. Serge, care to comment on maybe even that data collection piece and engaging up and downstream suppliers and sharing that?
Yeah, data sharing. What a short term and what a long topic if we discuss it to the extent. No, actually, in our proposal to decarbonize, the beginning, of course, is always to get the data together and to get a robust view on where we are. And already there, we struggle with data sharing by the side of the carrier. And there is a rumor which is absolutely wrong. This is that it was the smaller carriers which don't have the ability to get primary data from trucks, etc. So it's very often the commercial relation or the trust between the shipper and the carrier which is not there. And in that sense, the approach from Electrolux to have long-term relations, trustful relations with the supplier base is the precondition to enable data sharing. In all fairness, I have to say, I see large carriers sharing more than 90% of their data, of the insights. The shippers do not have to see all the nitty-gritty details of the insights with their shippers, and the same carrier shares only 1% with another shipper. I think that really speaks for itself. In that sense, the close relation to carriers is highly important, as Electrolux is performing that. And in particular, on the way to decarbonize, we have to understand that these investment strategies, for example, into a truck technology, first of all, these trucks are, as we speak, approximately 3.5 times as expensive as a conventional truck. So that's quite an investment. And then it is supposed to be in use for in total 17 years. This makes it a really strategic decision. And if you have in balance a 1-year contract with a supplier, with a shipper, well, that's not a good precondition to go for such investments with such high risks. We have to understand that. And there are also some financial institutions which try to help both shippers and logistics service providers to find a good balance between the risk and the investment, because that is really needed. Otherwise, we are on the wrong page if we just want to wait for the carriers to move on their own without any coverage from the shipper side.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, especially on the equipment and the technology piece, depths of relationships, financing constraints. But that's going to have to be another show because we just don't have time to dive into that one. I would love to make sure we come back and hear from Marcelo. What's next? Meaning we've got a strategy, we've got targets, we are engaging, we're actively engaging. Is there another lever that we need to pull, or what's missing to move faster? Is it policy? Is it tax dollars? Is it all about technology, or are there just continued mind shift and business model changes that need to happen in order to make your suppliers help you deliver on those targets?
That's a very good question. Because the more we speak about this, making this transition, of course, there are challenges about the new technologies. For instance, I can name the electric truck part, which it's hard to implement because we don't have the public infrastructure for the time being, and I think there will be in the future. But then you need to act on it. So if you don't have it, let's go invest it. We have the luxury at the Electrolux Group to make this investment, and we are coming at our own facilities to promote the development of technology. But to me, it's really about debating about these things, what we can do together. So in all the collaboration groups that we are participating, we are always inviting for new ideas, how can we overcome the challenges? And You asked me what's next. I think that the key is the involvement of the other groups that are part of the problem, but also part of the solution. And here we'll give you data. Last year, we invited 100 of our top suppliers worldwide to participate in the CDP disclosure. So they are disclosing what they are emitting in terms of CO2, and 100% attended our request. So that means there is the willingness of our supply base to do this change. But as you mentioned, that is the challenge of the government and the public part that maybe needs to accelerate a bit more. And I know the European Commission is doing also a good job at that, because there is money available. We just need to channel this money to the right projects. And we are part of that. And I want to continue to be part of these conversations. But maybe not many people are yet aware of this, involved in these conversations. And here, this conversation we are having today, I hope this will reach other companies, other people that are interested in making this progress, because there are lots of tables of discussions out there. We cannot meet every single one of them as much as I would love to, but there are opportunities for everyone to participate, contribute, and also be part of this change. So we're committed, as we call it, to drive the change in transportation, at our business, and also for the health of our planet.
That's really encouraging to hear, and hopefully that's the takeaway for many of our listeners on this show is, to borrow Electrolux's tagline, let's shape living for the better. It's a mindset change, and it's do more. Let's continue to engage with our stakeholders. Let's learn, let's report, let's make the changes we need to make. And if there are constraints or challenges, let's involve and broaden the net to have the conversation of, this is too expensive, or I can't bear that entire cost, or it doesn't fit with my model. The more we talk and the more we proactively work together, you give engineers and motivated people and logistics professionals enough time and money and willingness, we can figure it out. I'm confident. Thank you for sharing that. Serge, you've been on this show a couple times, so I'll reframe this question for you. But Marcelo, as a first timer, I always ask guests to come on the show. What's your personal motivation for getting up, going to work, and trying to tackle decarbonization initiatives or bringing sustainability into your day job? What is that motivation for you?
Yeah, I must say that in that sense, Transporeon is really in a luxury position, because it's at the bottom of our heart to bring logistics in sync with the world. We just had to add one more dimension and focus on it. And I have the pleasure to foster sustainable solutions to the extent I want within the organization, which is like a dream job, right? Maybe I shouldn't be paid for that even. And let me give you, it's when I was at the university, which is obviously a few years back, Nike had a claim, just do it. And this is exactly the situation we find ourselves in. And coming back to the point Marcelo raised before, intermodal transport, which indeed, from my point of view, is one of the levers to achieve net zero transportation. On one hand, we performed in collaboration with ALS, the Alliance for Logistics Innovation through Collaboration, a study on the rail system and the shortcomings and the weaknesses. And the main point found was that shippers claim that there is no good integration of intermodal and rail solution into other supply chain solutions. So we said, let's do it. And before doing so, we asked our own shipper society, in total 1,300 accounts, if they would consider to book intermodal transport over our platform straightforward. I mean, we have, like the industry does, some 7% transports booked intermodally anyhow, but to a larger extent. And I was a bit skeptic, and it's still a forward-looking statement. However, 95% of our customer bases said, yes, we will likely, or in any case, do that. 25% said we will for sure do that. The other 70% said we will very likely do that. Only 5% said probably we would not do so. And then we asked them how much of your volume would be concerned. And the answer on weighted average was 15%, which is about double of the intermodal market share of today. So the option is there to double. And we know from studies in the fast-moving consumer good industry that if you look just on the shipment level, you could move by lead time, by accuracy, etc. You could easily move 40% of your road transport to intermodal. We just don't do it because we are stuck in old habits, in old school approaches where we make a tender and 4 years later we still execute all the transports on the same lane as we defined it in the very beginning. It all goes road if we've once found a shipment which was super urgent. And we want to make an end to that. So our goal was to facilitate our shippers booking intermodal transport over our platform. We partnered with a couple organizations, just like the Rail Cargo Group, which is the second largest rail and intermodal operator in Europe for freight, to make a good deep integration so that everyone can benefit from that, and the shift to other modalities than road is getting much easier for the shipper. And it's a question really of ease of use, single sign-on principles. And that altogether, of course, is great fun, I have to say.
It is great fun, and that's a good call out because it's impactful, right? That's 60 to 70% emissions reductions when you shift to rail over road, at least. And making it easy, I think, is the other key component there too. If we take away some of those operational constraints on the planning side, and we're serving up better data alongside cost and transit time, where people can now see the emissions impact of these procurement decisions. Marcelo, I know looking at your report that you guys have a logistics dashboard, that you're incorporating a lot of these metrics now into the actual procurement exercises. And we weren't doing that previously. So I'm confident now that we're making these changes because we have better data and access to make these decisions. With that, let me turn it back over to Marcelo to bring us home. And kind of that first question I asked, why does this matter to you personally, sustainability as your day job?
I think it's about doing the right thing, Tyler, because, we want us as humanity to succeed. We want to be here in the future, also for our kids, now the next generations. And it's about doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is not that difficult. If we think in the same way, in my particular job, what I'm trying to do is to promote the best transport solutions for our consumers, for our customers, so they can choose what is the most sustainable way of transport. But it's about giving these options, the choice to the consumers. Serge was mentioned about the modality part. And if I can hold on that, back in 2017, we would utilize in average between 15 to 17% of our shipments of finished goods at Electrolux Europe, utilizing rail and intermodal all combined. Our running rate of the last weeks has been 61%. So 61% of our finished goods that are reaching our customer and the distribution centers, they have been delivered either intermodal or rail direct, because we also have our facilities in rail connected. But when we set this ambition a few years ago, I personally thought, man, this is not possible to achieve, but it's possible. It's all about doing the right thing, doing the right choices, but also set strategies and setting some ambitions when you are selecting the transport carriers, when you are defining the lanes that you're going to utilize. And we've been doing that every year, increasing a bit more. And also we are now, in this moment, working in the profile of the suppliers. Okay, which are the suppliers that have the same vision as an Electrolux Group? Because we work with these guys. Don't driving traditional transport company, eventually you got to work for somebody else, maybe the competition. But for us, we have to share the same vision, the same framework, and share the same ambition. So that's and how I would like to conclude it in this part, because we can do it. It's about taking the decision, take the will.
I love that. That's super encouraging. And to borrow phrases from both of you right there, like it's hard to shape living for the future, to make it better, but just do it and we can get there. I love that. Thank you both for your insight and for your expertise and for the work you're doing. It's meaningful. Thank you. I hope the listeners enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much, Tyler. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, Tyler. Glad to be here with you.
Thank you.
Start working toward your lower carbon goals today with Chevron Renewable Energy Group's Endura Fuels, a complete line of quality renewable fuel solutions available now. To learn more, visit regi.com.
There is over $1 trillion of waste in supply chains today.
The net zero carbon emission is something that corporates are taking very seriously.
To meet these objectives, they're going to have to take into consideration